Welcome to the Intrazone, a show about the Microsoft 365 Intelligent Intranet. I'm Mark Cashman, and here with my co-host is the Chris, forever Chris McNulty.
You know, Mark, I just say your name usually. I'm here with Mark Cashman. I'm going to have to put some more thought into clever intros.
Well, your name is written like 4 or 5 times. Chris McNulty. So that's what I said. I just read what I see.
And who wrote that? As our audience knows, I mostly just show up and make it up as I go along. And I will say, oh, Captain, my Captain. Today, we catch up with our fearless captain and corporate vice president, Jeff Teper. We'll be talking with Jeff about our response to the COVID-19 crisis and the moves to remote work with Microsoft Teams.
Exactly. We will also drill into Microsoft's recent build announcements. There was a couple of good highlights, mainly progress on Project Cortex and the disclosure of Microsoft lists, plus highlighting plans for our upcoming events with Inspire and Ignite.
You know, it's a very interesting time, both kind of in the world at large, responding to the COVID-19 crisis, the global discussions that have been happening across America's cities, in particular about how we respond to race. I think it's kind of remiss if we don't acknowledge some of those awarenesses before we plunge into new technology.
Yeah, it's a balance of a lot going on. You know, when we get into talking about what we'll cover with Jeff, there's a balance of what he and his team are doing to respond to a lot of the events, specifically a lot of the remote work. And then there's just a balance of where you focus your time and where you support. And based on what your ideology is and where you think things are important, that is a balance across a lot of different approaches, a lot of balance of how much time do you have and how do you spend that time. And I certainly have been spending a lot of time personally watching my children get very involved in how their schools were responding, the local community and how they were responding, and some direct support and certainly some financial support in supporting a lot of the movement. But I think it is a balance. There is always work in life, and striking that balance is sometimes tricky. I'd be curious to see how it's been going for you, Chris.
So a couple of things. So as I'm recording this, I am about to embark on a cross-country journey. Traveling is new and exciting again, right? And so for the first time in my life, I'll be driving to and from the East Coast to pick up my kids who are in Boston. Go Sox. See, sports reference.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting for me to kind of observe the way that the country is going day to day as I'm driving out there and driving back. One thing I have been able to do kind of this week is with some of the protests in response to it, there's a section in downtown Seattle, Capitol Hill, that is currently occupied as part of what they call CHOP, the Capitol Hill Occupational Protest. And I went down there yesterday just to sort of observe for myself and to sort of listen and learn and take some time to reflect on things. And it was a really interesting opportunity I had to travel there. One thing I would also love to get your take on, kind of pivoting our attention to technology, which is sort of what this show is supposed to be about. Not news and not sports, despite my best efforts.
Are they really your best efforts, Chris? I think you try to throw sports in there pretty much any chance you get.
Okay, so up next, we'll be discussing the response of Major League Baseball to the COVID-19 crisis.
Chris is rounding the corner of Kansas City. He's coming in hot, going to Cincinnati. Chris is going to the back wall. He jumps, he catches it, he scores, he shoots, he does all those sports things.
There is, though. I am going to return this to technology. I think there's been a lot of pent-up demand because we have seen two things going on during the early waves of this crisis. One, I think Microsoft, and we've heard this before, really pivoted to supporting remote work and kind of the massive explosion of demand for Microsoft 365 services, for Teams, for SharePoint, for communications, new users. And a lot of our attention was rightfully turned to maintaining and growing the baseline service. At the same time, you've had new users coming in, but especially there are people who are innovators. And we have all of this pent up innovation kind of building with users who are waiting for it. So we're at this really interesting pivot point where I feel like we are making progress at accommodating the surge. And we think it's probably ready to turn our attention back to technology innovation. I was wondering to get your take on that.
Yeah, I know some of the areas that we want to chat with Jeff about really focus in on the evolution of technology in the face of response and how he and his team, based on now an overwhelming amount of customer feedback and, of course, use, and how to prioritize. There were always the focus of what can we do to delight that will surprise people, and what can we do to maintain the base, and not just of people, but the goodness of the service, that it's up and running, reliable, performant, all of those things. Seeing a lot of the decisions they've made recently, and hopefully to the delight of customers, in being very responsive to actual need, real non-trivial use of the service, and really helping that drive priority, and of course the response to get it in market as fast as possible so that it is as useful as possible with the least amount of a warning, but with the solidness of how it actually then lands in production. So the areas that we want to chat about with Jeff, I think it's going to be enlightening to hear the response time, the prioritization, and then the end user outcome in truly enabling that remote workforce, or just tackling those things that are actually the most useful at this time in greater need.
Mark, I think that's right. And to help our audience get ready for bringing Jeff on the air here in just a few minutes, I think it would be great to reintroduce some innovations that we've been talking about publicly. Before we hear from Jeff about Project Cortex, we'd like to play a recent clip from our colleague, Naomi Moneypenny, who shares what Project Cortex is, as well as the value she and team are building for Microsoft 365 customers.
Thanks so much, Chris. It's great to see how Project Cortex really fits into that whole value proposition that we have within Microsoft 365 for knowledge and insights inside of your organization. So let's talk a little bit about what these different experiences look like within Project Cortex. It's really about connecting people and knowledge all together. And so we've got a great range of experiences that allow you to build knowledge into your everyday experiences at work and the way that you discover topics and content and people that are relevant to you. All of this work is really a great part of Project Cortex because we don't think that AI is really a substitute for great IA. So if you think about the different ways that you use content types and taxonomy inside of your organization, if you are using them already, we think it's a great foundation for you to do more, and you'll be able to do even more capabilities in the future as well. Now, of course, a part of all of this, we don't expect every user inside of your organization to go tag all of this information, right? That's the completely unnecessary step in our perspective. But one of the things that we do want to think about is how people and AI are really partnering together to be able to extract what's important to you and to be able to process the content in new and intelligent ways. Now, there's a range of kind of techniques that you can use as part of Project Cortex. There is, of course, a bunch of things that you can do manually right now, and there's a great ways that we already support inside of Microsoft 365. But we're also looking at smart ways to help you out of the box. So, for example, we're putting some of the Azure computer vision capabilities directly inside of Microsoft 365, so that when you get intelligence from images, we're helping to extract text as part of that, doing some identification of what those types of images are as part of that as well. And then we're doing some great new techniques as well in Project Cortex. So think about, form processing. Form processing is one of those areas where you might have a very structured document, and we're able to, in this case, use the AI Builder platform from our Power Platform colleagues as a way to bring that information into your organization in an easy way. Now, one of my favorite methods in all of this is, of course, how we deal with unstructured information as well. With machine teaching, we have a new set of capabilities that allow you to extract what's important in the unstructured documents and be able to use those as part of approvals and workflows.
Today on the Intrazone, Mark and I are really happy to bring back Jeff Teper, CVP for Teams, OneDrive, and SharePoint, a frequent guest on the Intrazone, well known to our audience. Jeff, welcome back.
It's great to be back, guys. Thank you for keeping the podcast going. I've listened to them while in the car and on the run, and glad to be back.
Jeff, we always love to welcome you to the show, and at this point in time, we are certainly talking to you through Teams. You're at your home, and we are at ours, and we're happy to see that you're happy and healthy. Can you just share a little bit about how the recent weeks have been going with you, connecting with the community, the Microsoft and SharePoint community? Mainly just wanted to start to check in with you. How are all things going?
Thanks, guys, and I hope you guys and your family are doing well as well. It's really important, first and foremost, to check in on each other. This has been a challenging period. One, having people work from home is hard. And just like most organizations, we have a spectrum of employees and personalities and locations. And, for many of them, it's hard. And so we want to be there to support them. First and foremost, people need to be taking care of themselves and their families. We've had some really challenging but also heartwarming examples of our team doing that. The second is scaling the service has been unprecedented. I've been here for 28 years. I was here in the launch of MSN V1 and SharePoint V1 and Office 365 V1. And never have I seen anything like the last quarter where millions of new users, some days, many days, showed up to our services all at once. And many of the users that were using the service went from an hour or two of meetings a day to multiple hours of meetings a day. It was great to be there for customers. And I think the service did very well through that, but it was a lot of work. And I'm appreciative of our team that both had their own families and challenges to deal with, but also stood up and supported our customers. And we learned a lot. Again, we were sort of grateful that we could help, but we still learned a lot. And then I think the third thing is we are connecting with customers and partners virtually, both one-on-one customer meetings that I've done in these events from one to many. But it's not the same. I miss going to a SharePoint Saturday. I miss SPC. And when it's safe, I think the world's changed permanently because of what we've gone through, but we will go back to a mix of virtual and in-person events and meetings, and it'll be great to do that. I would say on a personal level, I really miss the opportunity to connect with our customers and partners in person.
Yeah, I really think the new hybrid is going to be that physical virtual mix, the way that we've used hybrid for different things going before. Jeff, I'd love to kind of ask you to reflect a little bit on kind of the journey that you've been seeing our customers going on. At Microsoft, the organization that creates Microsoft Teams should be in many ways well positioned to transition into a remote everything mode. And we've had our own cultural and operating shifts that we've had to absorb. What have you been learning from our customers over the past few months as they've been going through that journey on their side?
It's been fascinating to talk to a variety of different companies. I did a call that we posted on LinkedIn with KPMG, who has about 200,000 people using Microsoft Teams. I talked to a couple of senior leaders of that organization in a Teams call about what they were facing internally as well as with their clients. I think a lot of people's first reaction is it's remarkable how these tools and cloud services we have are letting us do this. If you think about 10, 15 years ago, if something like COVID had happened, it would have been even more challenging to have continuity business and education. And so the KPMG was talking about how they were doing all these meetings internally with clients. People were on different mobile devices, distributed all over the world. People's first reaction in most organizations is feeling pleasantly surprised how well things are able to continue. And in the midst of all the challenges, having a sense of purpose for them and their organizations. And so that's probably the first reaction. The second reaction is the details of working from home are hard. Talking to people about family members who are ill or child care, the space, network connectivity. And so everybody goes through stories there, and we're learning, time management. One thing I've heard from, people were worried, would people be working less? What I hear more often is people are working more, that it's a lot easier after dinner to just walk a few feet back to your office and get back to work. Because it's a crisis, it feels like crisis mode, and people should be working to help. And so people are wrestling with that time management and psychological issues. And then there are some particular institutions, maybe they weren't ones that went to the cloud very quickly, or they have distributed populations of stakeholders. Education is the tough one. I mean, we've read about the teachers wrestling with technology and having access to students and parents, and we'll continue to make some updates on all the great schools we've been working with, but that's been really, really hard. This has certainly been easier on, say, a KPMG than a distributed school system with a limited set of technical resources. So
I saw locally, not too far from the Redmond campus, where there were, a percentage of the children that didn't have Wi-Fi or didn't have laptops. And so there was a pause on how they put the plan together, where they ensured that everybody was able to connect. I know through Microsoft and a lot of other local community efforts, they got people what they needed. And even though they might have been behind on the plan just because, that's a big turnaround for a school to completely go to distance learning, but to see them make sure everybody was able to connect. Of course, technically, I've loved to watch what the team is doing to scale and to respond, and of course, all the features that are coming. But there's also this notion of a new etiquette for how to be online, how to expect what you get from others, and the notion of you get better at including other people. On your team, I'm sure, Jeff, and for Chris and I, we've got some members that are in Australia, Sweden, UK. It used to be like they felt they weren't included, and now we are all in some other location. And it's really great to see the tech support it, but also the people adapt to it.
Yeah. I've also been observing, with my own kids, my sister, who is a school teacher on the East Coast, adapting to something which I wouldn't say it's second nature for us, but kind of the density of meetings from 8 a.m. till 1. My own kids struggle a little bit with that intensity and that resilience. And, it's one of the things I'm mindful that the way that many of us have tried to inject some of those more thoughtful moments into the personal part of our workday, whether it's cooking more, or bike riding, or going for runs, some of that time to be reflective. I do think, there's definitely learnings that we can take forward to making sure that we're driving an even better experience in using this technology to kind of further these remote work goals that people are seeing.
Yeah, and it's really been a mixed blessing of this to have the opportunity to learn on exactly what you said, Chris, because there's things we can do in the software to nudge and support people to what will be better experiences. I've spent a bunch of time on this with the team. We actually had a great meeting with Jeff Weiner a few weeks ago where we were talking about how to run effective meetings and what could we do in the office tools and teams to encourage that. This morning, my first meeting was about calendaring and scheduling meetings in teams. And there are some things that people will say are obvious in terms of break time and so forth. We have a bunch of ideas, some of which we're well along on that I can't share yet because we want them to not be scooped, that I think if we can help people have both more engaging meetings, but also not necessarily attend all, a lot of people attend meetings because of FOMO. Like, oh my gosh, they're going to review the latest stuff in the SharePoint UX. Both you guys will go to the meeting, as opposed to saying, well, I'll just catch up with Chris later. What if, that was better self-documenting, so you didn't feel like if you were having a busy day, you had to go to every meeting? We have some pretty exciting stuff coming there. And I think it's been motivated by the experience we've all gone through, which is, gosh, I had 10 hours of online meetings today. What would have happened if I had 8 and I got 2 hours back? Maybe I would have lunch with I'm at home. Maybe I would have lunch with my wife. Maybe I would have used an hour to get more work done. We're not letting this opportunity to learn and drive new product ideas go to waste.
If you can come up with one that lets me know that it's okay for me to be an audio-only participant so I can take the meeting with me on a walk, that's a great feature.
Yeah, it's interesting how we've gone from it's rude to not turn on your video to realize it's sustainable to not have your video on all the time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah.
I will sometimes personally, if there's a meeting I don't have to be at live, but I want to listen to later, I'll use the fact that on the stream recording, I can speed it up to 1.5 or 1.75. And if I'm running an errand in the car, I can get through a 30-minute meeting in 15 minutes.
So, Jeff, we've got a couple of technology areas we want to center in on, and we want to have it span all things that you cover. We want this notion of, Teams and SharePoint and where the role of OneDrive comes in. But we thought we've been talking a little bit about Teams, so I think maybe we can round off on Teams. But when you think of beyond the scale and the response to the crisis and this incredible amount of use and how you responded to that, what were some of the things that maybe were a little bit lower on the roadmap that got accelerated that are very specific to working remotely that you might touch on?
Yeah, the way I think about it is each part of Microsoft 365 has to be great in the user jobs that it's focused on. And then the tools have to come together in a way that's synergistic, simple, governable, and as a platform. And so as I think about Teams, one thing that we did that people were really excited about, let's start with the least obvious one maybe, is pop-out chat. That if you're in a meeting all day long, sometimes you've got to multitask and you want to pop out one or more windows to have side conversations with people in the meetings or maybe outside the meetings. And so one of the things we got out that people are thrilled about, that's a huge productivity boom, is pop-out chat. Meetings experience itself, long list. We have done raising hands. We have gone to 3x3 video. We're on our way on the journey to do pop-out windowing, although that hasn't been deployed, meeting window that hasn't been deployed externally yet, but internally we're getting a lot of great feedback on that. We're doing more safety features for, to give people, the right slider between low friction and security. Custom backgrounds. It's tough. We're recording this on June 8th. Depending on when you post this, there may be much more that we've shared. So we've definitely, since the first week in March, I would say, when it was clear to us what was going to happen, we accelerated a bunch of things, some of which already shipped in May, some of which you'll see in June and July.
I'm actually, even though this is audio only, I'm using one that has taken me a little bit to get used to. I'm using it right now, where I've raised my hand to ask a question. That's been a really interesting one to watch, to use when meetings are larger, but also to get back to that point around etiquette. Other people identifying, hey, Mark has his hand raised, Mark has a question, something like that.
Well, here's a fun fact for you on this one. I just saw it today. I bet you'd be curious, Mark, how many hands have been raised in education in just the few weeks since we've rolled out the feature. As of this morning, in education, 13 million hands have been raised.
Oh my God, really?
Yes.
Wow.
Fun fact.
That's a great fun fact. Well, we'll definitely highlight that one. That is fun and truly leads to a great outcome, the answers. That must mean there's 13 million answers out there.
And we get some really good feedback about, could you help for the people calling on people? Could we do some things in the UI to help order? You wouldn't want it always to be first come, first serve. Sometimes judgment goes involved, but people have given us a whole bunch of ideas on hand raising moderation features we should build into the product.
Very nice. Well, moving off of Teams, we know that there's a ton of work on Teams. And the reality is that we are using it now. We benefit from everything that your team is doing. And the switch from a meeting every once in a while on Teams to now a lot. I feel like I've adapted, but I've adapted to the context of the tool has let me adapt and has made it very accessible. So kudos to you and your team for doing a lot of great work there. I'm going to throw to Chris. I think Chris might have another area of interest that he wants to chat about that I get to just be party to listen to because I've heard him talk about it a couple of times, but I want to hear him get a little insight from you, Jeff.
I will ask on behalf of the audience, since I'm kind of in the know on Project Cortex, but Jeff would love to have you share with our audience what most excites you about Project Cortex, this major initiative we have to create new experiences for knowledge and content throughout the suite. What are you looking forward to? What have customers been talking to you about with Project Cortex?
Project Cortex is one of the most exciting things I've gotten the chance to work on for a long time. And to some extent, it builds on the vision we had from the very first version of SharePoint, which is think about content for both business processes and knowledge management. And if I think about the tools we've given people in Microsoft 365 in general and in SharePoint in particular, SharePoint has allowed people to put something in place so human beings can do work to work on content for both business process and knowledge discovery. But people had to do work. Their ROI was there that if I organize documents, other people could find them. If I create great websites, people would be informed and engaged. And that was good. There was a return on the investment. But technology is supposed to help reduce work and improve output. And so what we're doing with Cortex is taking those two scenarios, business processes and knowledge discovery, and saying, hey, maybe AI can help. Maybe it can help organize the documents and augment them with metadata and learn from some human beings' work so that others don't have to do it over and over again. Maybe Cortex in the AI can help generate great websites for you to help you navigate content and information and other people and experts and so forth. In some ways, it's new in that we're using a set of new AI technologies that were only recently become available. But in some ways, it's fulfilling a promise of how can we help organize information for both business processes and knowledge discovery. And so that's why I'm sort of excited, because it's been a problem I've been trying to work on for a few years. And the customer response, as you know, has been outstanding. We show people Cortex. Some people gravitate to the business process side. Some people gravitate to the knowledge discovery side. But the feedback has been really outstanding, and we're excited to have it in preview and be on the home stretch of it.
I can't tell you a ton as much as Chris can, but my first experience with Cortex was I sent an email to Naomi and Chris asking about Project Cortex, and Project Cortex came up as a topic card for me to go learn more about Project Cortex. I still sent the email, but it was really neat to see it not only in the demos that I've seen and obviously the marketing, but to see it in practice and to have it within where I work a lot, which is Outlook. You know, I knew there were a lot of smarts going on. I knew that there had been some base elements, like you had mentioned, that certainly pull from the past. But I think that's true for so many things that have been developed, you know, as of late. Yeah, I think of a lot of technology that is born on the back of SharePoint and moves it forward. The next thing that I'd want to chat about is absolutely one of those things. Chris, on your end, you know, when you think of the different teams coming together that work, you know, with Naomi and other teams, how are all those teams coming together, especially as they're starting to get this notion of preview feedback? You know, are all pistons firing, or still some of those, you know, little kinks to work out? How close are we?
I think we're moving in the right direction. You know, I want to be thoughtful that, you know, you roll things back. Gosh, I remember going to, when I was still on the customer side, at Tech Ed in Dallas years ago, and went to a presentation of all the different possible ways you could configure email. And, you know, I hope that internally we are driving towards creating a smoother experience for our customers, because I really have to give Naomi and team credit for two things especially. First is that the stuff that we're doing with Cortex has really been grounded in extensive customer research and engagement to make sure that we are going back for feedback, listening for use cases, and responding to what we're hearing there. And also, I think the team's been super thoughtful about looking around Microsoft to find existing / better technologies to integrate those into the solution, rather than creating lots of different ways of doing things and having the customer sort it out. I think Cortex really brings, you know, some of the best work that's been done from across Office and Microsoft 365 and Power Platform and Azure and our research division, because from the customer level, they want to be able to have that pre-built experience. That's one thing that, you know, Microsoft 365 has, is that core value, that it is both a platform and an application. And I think we're moving in the right directions. You know, the jury is out. Check back in a year and see if the customers respond to it the way that we're hoping they will.
Nice. as we switch context, let's now turn our focus to hear a little bit more about Microsoft Lists. And before we get into asking Jeff about it, let's hear from our colleague Michaela Barrett about Microsoft Lists and how it's an evolution of SharePoint Lists.
Lists is your smart information tracking app in Microsoft 365 to create, share, and track work across your team. For example, with Microsoft Lists, it is simple to create an issue tracking list to track progress on issues that need to get completed. Using lists to create an event itinerary helps plan and coordinate an office, conference, or business summit with many different speakers and sessions. Using a list to create an asset manager helps you keep track of physical assets that your team is using, noting who has each device, repair status, check-in and out dates, all while ensuring everyone is informed. Microsoft Lists can be used from within the apps you use every day, such as Microsoft Teams. For example, the status reporting list helps my team stay connected as results pour in across the team. Many of you might already be familiar with the ability to create lists in Microsoft 365 within SharePoint sites. Rest assured, everything I'm showing is an evolution of those capabilities. Our goal is to make those of you already using lists more productive and make it easier than ever to get started.
So Jeff, I was hoping we could go back into your star log if you are the captain of SharePoint. Go back just a few years and get a little bit of this grounding element of a list. I want to talk about Microsoft Lists, but I first really want to ask you, in the original design phase of SharePoint, the design of what a list would do and what role it would serve, how would you define it way back when in that early Stardate log? And then we'll talk about today.
I think the impetus for them was that we needed an incredibly lightweight way for people to create a something that had a bit of structure, schema, was inherently multi-user, and that the vast majority of the world's needs for that are met via spreadsheets. At that point, spreadsheets didn't have co-authoring, but some of what spreadsheets give you in flexibility is not always the controlled experience you want for enforcement of schema and views. And so, predating all the stuff in Office, there have been spreadsheets and databases around since the very first PC. And so what we were trying to do is have these team lists where people could easily define issues or customers or events or t-shirts and just track them in a collaborative web-based list. And it was one of the things that people got excited about SharePoint on. And then developers came along and said, hey, this is pretty cool. Not free, but bundled web-based database. We like that. We want to build our own custom views on that. You're worrying about all the storage. We'll build on your workflow and so forth. And so that was something maybe we didn't fully anticipate at the beginning, because we were trying to focus much more on being an application and address an unmet need. But then the sort of customization grew and grew, and as technologies evolved, people really embraced. One of the things we announced, the Future of SharePoint event in 2016, was integration of Flow, now Power Automate, and Power Apps with SharePoint Lists. And that skyrocketed, and I'm really proud that SharePoint Lists helped catalyze some of the growth in Power Apps, because not just end users, but sort of IT analysts saw the value of a lightweight end user database as well. And so that's what we're trying to do, is just address this need as quickly as possible. And we thought there was a space, if you will, if you think about spreadsheets and their flexibility for every user, and databases, things like SQL and CDS and so forth for developers. We thought there was room in the middle for an casual end user web-based database. And it's one of the things people always loved about SharePoint. And one of the things that makes us unique is that we, in the same architecture and experience, we have both files and lists. So the skills you learn by creating a view of RFP documents by project code, you can do for issues in a list. And so the fact that we have a data model in SharePoint that spans lists and documents is unique and incredibly powerful. And it's funny, I think there's really no other product in the market that does that today. Back long time ago, Lotus Notes did this. But I think one of the unique aspects about lists is that you can focus on a list when you want to. But it is a good thing that it's the same architecture and experience as working on files with structured data.
I think it is, because there's sometimes a list that you want to just reference a file, and then there's sometimes a file that you want to reference some information or an image. And it seems to be complementary. And I think once you get over the hump that they really are based on that same basic structure, that there's then a lot of value in how people then can carry forward all the value of both.
Yeah, but then we realized we needed a no compromise, simple experience too. And so that's probably going to lead us into your next set of questions.
It is. If we think of Microsoft Lists as this evolution of SharePoint lists, to our core audience for this podcast and certainly out to our SharePoint community, that's a relief. That's an eyebrow, wipe. But we really want to target people that either haven't gone to SharePoint or aren't comfortable with that as a skill set. So how do you then redefine lists, up-level them to the Microsoft level? And I think the last, I don't think it's too stretched to put it in the same question, to then bring that experience into Microsoft Teams, where you see a new content type for a lot of users, the list or the list item, alongside their conversations and where their team is working. How do you quantify all of that as what we are now calling Microsoft Lists?
I'm incredibly bullish on our strategy here. We sort of came up with it about a year ago and launched it at Build, and the response has been very good. There are two sides to this. One is the end user who's trying to understand in 60 seconds what we're doing. As you said, we're giving them a really streamlined list experience on web and mobile. I just want to make a list for an event. I don't want to worry about a team context. As few clicks or presses or swipes as possible, make that great. But also, if I am in a website or a team context, I have to get that same experience. And so just like we've done with files in Microsoft 365, files are everywhere. Of course, you can get to them all in OneDrive, but you can also get to them in Teams and Office and so forth. So for people new to us, this ability to have both the hero experience and the hub experience, I think, is powerful. The second group of people is the people who followed us for a long time, SharePoint fans. And this is kind of what we've been promising you with the graph, that all this data is in the graph and that we expose multiple experiences from it. And so it's not lists or SharePoint or Teams. Lists are in the graph, and you can get access to them from multiple places. And so all the SharePoint lists you already have are going to get better. You can make new lists, and people don't need to know a technical detail that they're backed by SharePoint. But for our SharePoint fans out there, this is sort of really what we want you to get, that SharePoint is this content management fabric in the graph that can store files and lists and pages and sites and so forth. And sometimes those will be in standalone hero apps like OneDrive or the list apps. And sometimes they'll be integrated on pages or in hubs like in Teams. And so it's pretty, it's the Lego vision that we've been promising with Microsoft 365.
Yeah, it's a lot of moving parts. We talked a while back that this was Office 365 and BPOS even before it was moving the products to being a service. And I think in this era, especially in the last 6 to 12 months, it has been to blend and create new experiences that are a lot more unified. Cortex is a real aggregate of a ton of great technology, but to the end user, it's just a single experience. It's not even really a new app. It's a new experience, truly. To see those lines blurred, but to the benefit of an end user who is just trying to do X, not trying to use a certain product.
Yeah, exactly. And so we've got to make sure our storytelling addresses both those audience. One is this is really simple. You want the best way to create a simple little lightweight list. we're going to have the list app. You can customize the schema and views and so forth. And you don't have to know anything else. It's going to be the best in class experience. It's going to raise a new bar in user experience from Microsoft. It's great. That's all you need to know. And then there's the second group that wants to know how all the pieces fit together and does care and say, well, yes, this is SharePoint under the cover, so it can show up everywhere. And guess what? You get all the things you care about, multi-geo support and certifications and so forth. We're very careful in not telling that whole story the second audience cares about to the first audience who just wants to create a list of sessions for their event or something like that.
Mark, it's interesting, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit because as List has been rolling out, lots of people have shared their stories internally and publicly about what they use a list for. What's something that you're using a list for?
It might sound pretty obvious once I tell you, but the most important list that I currently manage and of course collaborate on is the list of lists roadmap items. Even though that might be a little cheeky, I've got a nice list that I've been working on with my peers and, of course, working with Jeff's crew, with Lincoln Damaris and Michaela Barrett and Niket Jain and the whole list team. And we're getting into a monthly rhythm where we put on the list what is going to be shipping or what can we talk about at Ignite or what has already shipped, and do we want to make sure that we're aligned with the public roadmap? So I built out a list, and this may surprise you, Chris, but I used a little JSON before the new UI was available. And I found our friend in the community, Chris Kent, who had a little sample code. And I put it so that our speakers, we could see their faces and, our PM owners. But I've now managed across, we're getting ready for Ignite. We have Ignite list of sessions that we're planning. We had all the third-party events. Jeff, this is the last thing that we want to touch on after our next topic, is supporting all third-party events. We had 15 sessions that we were managing through the different life cycle of getting them signed up and ready, available for X time and date. I have about 4 or 5 primary lists that I own, and there's about 5 or 10 that have been shared with me that now when I go to Lists Home, I see all of them and have chosen to favorite about 6 of them. It makes it a lot easier. Lists Home, as simple as it looks, is about the best thing when you want to get to all your lists instead of having to remember where to go and navigate through to the team, to the site contents if you didn't put in the left-hand nav and all that. That just getting to the list, and especially ones that are important, has been really a time saver for me. So we asked Jeff about the focus of he and his engineering team, what they have across Microsoft 365 to consistently improve performance. And we want to take a pause on our discussion with Jeff to play an audio clip from Ignite 2019, where Jeff shared broadly the focus of how we are turbocharging all of Microsoft 365 to improve all cloud user experiences.
Over the last couple of years, we've rewritten the user experience in the development platform. We even have a new logo to signify this new experience. But we also have massive new architectural investments that we've made behind the scenes. In fact, most of the SharePoint engineering team, hundreds of engineers, have been working on that back-end infrastructure to scale for the cloud and add new capabilities. At the SharePoint layer, we've rewritten a lot of core technology to give us the next 10x growth in storage that we need. First, we've got a brand new file I/O stack that we've done a lot of work at the HTTP and IP level in the kernel with the Windows team, so that once we get the data from Azure, we can deliver it to the clients as fast as possible. And we've completely redone huge chunks of our SQL storage architecture, so we get the benefits of transactional support for all the business logic, and there's a lot of business logic in the features you just saw, but with optimal performance, reliability, and costs. Why does this matter? It's about the user experience. We've turbocharged the SharePoint storage architecture so we can deliver better file experiences. Over the last 2 years, file downloads, including the sync performance, tenfold improvement. Office client app opening of large files, at at least 3x improvement. This depends on you having more recent Office desktop builds through Pro Plus, but it is pretty dramatically different for large files. Another piece I didn't talk about is search. For those of you who've been with SharePoint for a long time, you know we crawled SharePoint from our search engine. Last year, we introduced a new layer between the graph and SharePoint called the Content Push Service, where we're sending signals and content and group membership updates efficiently so that these search and AI features can show up in seconds as opposed to minutes. And all this has been architected in a way where it's, of course, when we get to write the Office client apps, we take advantage of it in the apps. But wherever possible, we've made it support all sorts of file types, from Markdown to 3D to AutoCAD and more. And the thing I'm most proud of is it's easy, or it's relatively easier in software to lower cost and optimize performance, but to do so while you're adding features, all these capabilities for collaboration, AI, and security, add compute and storage. And I'm really excited we've been able to deliver this while making those feature investments.
Jeff, the last thing that we wanted to talk to you about was underlying all of this is performance. The expectation to scale and be responsive and not lose performance. And in addition to that, over time, people expect pages to open faster, files to open quicker, save actions to go faster. And I know there's a lot that a lot of your different feature teams and primary teams are working on. I thought the framing that we could use was at the SharePoint Conference 2019, during your keynote, you had one section where you talked about turbocharging the SharePoint file storage system, and you shared a lot of details, and we had a blog that went out that supported that. But from that point in time, now going forward, how would you best answer, what are we doing to make it so that it's a great experience for end users?
Yeah, I think, and I stress this all the time for the team, that performance, other than reliability and security, is the most important thing we're doing that matters to users. And there's many things that get into performance. The thing we announced at that event was the new file system technology we'd built in SharePoint on top of Azure that allowed us to support, since then we've rolled out Delta synchronization in OneDrive for all file types, not just Office. It's enabled us to have faster co-authoring in Word, Excel, PowerPoint. It's enabled us to support even faster co-authoring and using the Fluid framework, which is in preview. It's supporting better and better streaming media and photo support out of SharePoint. More of that is coming on. So that was that piece of technology. And we've got more going on there, as you'd expect, with Azure teams and the kernel teams, the teams working on the NT kernel and File I/O, HTTP, TCP IP stack, and so forth. So we're definitely focused on File I/O performance, huge focus. Another area of focus for us is networking. A lot of our customers are around the world, and we're really the faster you can get your user to their data, the better the performance. And so we have some technologies in Azure Front Door and the resources we can put on CDNs, private CDNs, or if it's part of a public CDN. And we're talking to a lot of customers about networking, including what's called split tunneling, where if they trust Office 365, you can get off your corporate network into the cloud, into Microsoft's edge closer to the user. It makes a huge difference. It could be as much as 5 or 10x difference versus all the users' requests to SharePoint going over a company's internal network. So a lot of focus on that at Ignite, diagnostics performance, and even in a COVID world, focus on split tunneling. So you're not going from somebody's home to VPN to your network and then over your slower corporate network back out to the internet. If you trust the Microsoft Cloud, you can get dramatically better performance. Another area of focus for us is the web experience. If you're using a modern browser, hopefully the new Edge that's based on Chromium, as well as the Google's products and other modern ones, you will get dramatically better performance with Microsoft 365. The great thing about the new Edge is that it includes the compatibility mode, the separate rendering stack for Internet Explorer. So if you have legacy applications that need that, within one browser, you can get the best of both the modern web and the existing stuff that you may have built that has not been upgraded. And so we really want to get people, frankly, off of IE and previous versions of Edge onto a modern browser. And then within that, we're doing a lot of great work in the web client architecture. Our new Lists app is going to showcase a bunch of work we're doing on performance. You're seeing a bunch of it every day in SharePoint pages. We have some more stuff that if all goes well, we might show for Ignite as opposed to Next Build, but we have some pretty amazing spectrum of things coming. So that's, from the bowels of the kernel to the core file system in SharePoint to helping customers with their network, to their browsers, to our web architecture. We are leaving no stone unturned, and this is one of my favorite parts of the job. I could talk about just this topic for hours.
Well, the time that I saw it the most was I was supporting Lincoln Damaris, who was doing the Lists update for these third-party events. And I sat in, of course, was supporting him for all things. And when he was giving the demo that I just hadn't seen, I'd known that they were doing some improvements here. He put it into quick edit, and he just went around and did 10 or 15 things in about 10 or 15 seconds. And I just was blown away by the speed and performance of what he was able to do in quick edit. And it was live code, real demo.
Yeah.
I had to pause him afterwards before he continued and just say, I'd never seen that. That really was as fast as you said it was going to be. Really cool.
We use what's called WebSockets for a set of things so the service can update the client. There's some things in modern browsers called service workers and web workers where you can have things effectively be background threads. There's new ways to break up your code base for large web apps. There's something I saw the other day where we have very powerful search in Microsoft Search. As you would expect we would, we've factored the code so the TTI, time to interactive, is going to go down because we figured out how to factor out some of the code to load into the browser asynchronously in the background. So just for every new blog announcement we do, like Cortex and Lists, there is an equal number or greater number of engineers going into things that you won't see in blogs, which are just making the things we're doing even faster. To the point, as you know, I wanted to blog about it. It's because it's some of our most fun work that matters as much as any new feature does.
Well, that's great. I think the thing that Chris and I would just like to leave hearing from you is getting out of the tech and really talking about community. You've been involved recently with 3 events that I'm aware of and managing. I know probably about 2 or 3 others that I just caught wind of, but you've been connecting in the best way possible that you can. And of course, on behalf of Microsoft and connecting with our third-party community and our leaders out there, our partners. Just in short, can you give us a little sense of what it's been like to connect with the community in your keynotes and other?
Yeah. As you guys know, one of the most inspiring parts of working on SharePoint and now Microsoft 365 is that it attracts a community of people who are trying to share best practices and digest a continuing faster and faster pace of tech innovation, but also equally important, make some lifelong friends. I mean, Chris knows from having been on the other side of it, it is unbelievable how after 10, 15 years, how many great friendships have been built around this set of technologies. And when we can't meet in person and when we couldn't do the SharePoint conference or SharePoint Saturdays, people really missed that. So it was great to hear from some of our community leaders that they were going to respond by bringing their events virtual. And of course, we were thrilled to participate, help in any way we can. We learn from participating in these. We get a lot of great feedback. People are very appreciative. I did one call a couple weeks ago in Australia and New Zealand. That was, people were thrilled. It was amazing how excited people were to get a chance to talk to their colleagues, even virtually. So we're going to keep doing this, and I look forward to the day we're in person. But meanwhile, this is what we've got, and let's compare notes on how people are coping with all this and sharing technologies, and we'll keep listening.
That's great.
Absolutely.
Jeff, thank you very much for taking time out to sit down with the InterZone audience today. On behalf of Mark and myself, really appreciate that. We look forward to being able to see you share this news live at some sort of hybrid event coming up in the hopefully not too distant future.
Me as well. Thank you, guys. The work you're doing on the InterZone is awesome. I listened to the Year of Yammer update a week or so ago. That was a great one. So I encourage all the listeners to not just occasionally tune in, but to subscribe to the podcast and listen to every single one religiously, because you guys do a great job.
I never let a moment pass without a gratuitous Boston sports reference. So I'll just say I was sorry to see the Boston Marathon postponed itself. I hope you get to run there next year, Jeff.
Thank you. Me as well.
Up next, events, virtual events, coming to a kitchen or living room near you.
That's right. This summer, a big one for us, for our partners, and how we share a lot of information to the world, but very focused around our partner ecosystem, is Microsoft Inspire. That's July 21st to the 22nd. This is a virtual event, and we're excited to welcome you and thousands of our partners from around the world to an interactive digital platform. It's your opportunity to gain valuable insights into what's going on in the year ahead while learning effective strategies to propel your business forward and, of course, connect with partners that resonate with what you want to accomplish. You can learn more at inspire.microsoft.com.
And you can pay less because, like so many virtual events, it's free. Also coming up, #Collab Days. You can learn more at collabdays.org. Being held Italy virtually today on June 23rd, coming soon to the Netherlands and London on June 27th.
Yeah, and if you didn't get enough from Microsoft Inspire Collab Days, certainly there's a big event on the horizon. We don't yet have exact timing, but we can tell you, Chris and I and the broad Microsoft 365 marketing team with our engineering peers are gearing up for Ignite 2020. This will be later in the year before the end of the year, and we just want to share with you it has been declared that it's going to be completely virtual. So if you experienced Build 2020 with a variety of content throughout the day, different ways to engage, of course, with questions, different ways to meet with presenters, and of course to consume the content live and on demand. There's a lot of planning going into Ignite 2020, and we can't wait to share more about exact timing and specific sessions as we get later into the year. Chris, any thoughts on what you've heard around Ignite 2020 and what's been planned that you're close to?
Again, Ignite 2020, we're anticipating, we know that it will be a free event. So we've measured Ignites in past years in 5 figures of attendance. They've told us to be prepared for 6-figure attendance, which will be a really exciting way for us to do the first virtual digital Ignite.
I thought we could just round off on some association to the experience that we had at Build, but also with our third-party events that we mentioned on some previous episodes, where we worked closely with the Microsoft 365 Virtual Marathon team, the Galactic Collaboration Summit, and what's going on right now as we're recording is the GlobalCon 2, some of which we know there is more planned in the next quarter and into next year, but they've been great events to reach broadly, which is great as marketers. But there's also been a chance where we can be logged in live and engaged with questions. We've been hearing a lot of feedback. And I was speaking with some of our engineers specifically about what they were learning from the events, and they were just really pleased that it gave them an opportunity to meet with and hear from customers, something that they do a lot, but not as often as they'd like. So these events are a great way to get connected with people that are making the technology and help guide what it is that they're planning for the future.
So if you're listening to this and you know about another virtual event coming up later this summer, please write back to us. We would love to feature it on a future episode of The Intro Zone. Thanks again for spending the hour with Mark, with me, and of course, with our special guest this week, Jeff Teper. We'll put links in our show notes to everything we discussed in today's episode.
Check out our show page at aka.ms/theintrozone and our corresponding blog. We always try to load it with a lot of great information, visual, and things to click into and learn more.
And if you're curious about other Microsoft programming, such as SyncUp, the show about OneDrive, check out aka.ms/Microsoft/podcasts and find a new show today.
You can always email us at theintrozone@microsoft.com or on Twitter at SharePoint, at mcashman, and at cmcnulty2000.
And if you enjoy this show, or even if you don't, please still help us help more people. Share the SharePoint love, tell a friend, and subscribe wherever you get your podcast, which is more than likely still in your living room.
With that, we are your hosts, Mark Cashman and Chris McNulty, and you've been listening to The Intro Zone, a show powered by Jeff Teper and often about Microsoft 365. Thanks for joining.